All right, so welcome, Connor. Thank you so much for being here today. And yes, as I understand, you typically don't do introductions, correct?
That's correct. Yeah. 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 And what that is it's sort of a trope. I like to use language often that's pretty that can be pretty punchy, pretty even inflammatory sometimes. I like to push buttons maybe a little bit. Maybe I'm a little bit of a contrarian. I'm not anything in particular other than what I choose to be. And uh at the same time, I find it's fun to have conversations where right off the bat, what we're doing is we're invoking the presence of what's possible within us and simultaneously um, the presence of that. Okay, I was in a podcast interview a couple days ago and it came out in this way. And so I'm going to continue with this kind of metaphor that uh, there's the presence of what's real and true and possible within us. And simultaneously, there's the presence of this type A personality that's in the passenger seat.
Yes.
This conscious mind that for whatever stinking reason um sort of just has the tendency to orient itself to the world in a way that thinks that it needs to have the puzzle pieces and the variables sort of managed and figured out in order to feel safe,
Hmm.
in order to do anything, in order to create. um And so right off the bat, I love to square those two. The reason why I love that you invoked that because we've been talking for a little bit before hitting record, and you've been like, I was asking you about some things, and you're like, well, I don't remember about this or that, and I was like, that's great. We're starting from an even cleaner slate, but then here you are saying, you know what? I am aware that I don't do introductions. Um, what that is, the reason why I would say something like I don't do introductions, that's so silly, right? The reason why I would say something like that is because there are no words which I can offer which would identify me, which are true, other than, again, like I've already said, what I choose to be, which is a relationship with myself and the world that I think that I'm living in. And uh often I find that when you hear business coaches or whatever, they talk about you have to have a story and it has to be relatable and you have to be able to what's your story? I want to know your story. And am when I'm encountered with that kind of energy that asks of me that I put this life of mine that I think that I'm living into this container that has the rightly shaped puzzle pieces to kind of fit into your conscious mind's conception of yourself in a way that offers you something. I say, whoa, 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 whoa. There's nothing that I have to offer you that you don't at some level, in some sense, already know completely. And so that is a little bit of the middle of the road, medium length version of why I don't do introductions. Yeah, yeah.
And I think
Um, yeah.
I think what you just described is really kind of this whole, it could really sum up this whole life experience of feeling out of control. And so then feeling like we have to define and label things and put borders around things in order to feel in control and in order to feel safe.
Mhm, 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 mhm. And the next most obvious, most immediate question is, well, why would that be the case? Why, why? You know? And on the one hand, I could just as easily, really, really easily, it's so easy to just say, I don't need to know why. I don't need to know why.
And that's
Is my, yeah, yeah, go ahead.
and it's funny because that's one of the premises of your book, Trusting Your Foundation.
Hmm.
And I remember just reading that and just feeling the sense of relief when I read it. Because I think so often the logical mind, it just immediately goes to why and how.
Hmm.
And just knowing that we don't need to understand why or how all of this works in order to, I guess, experience the benefits.
Oh my God, Kate, what a concept, right? That's so I hear the congruence and coherence within yourself that you relate,
Yes.
like this. There's a way of being in the world that greases the wheels, and all that it is a return to the things which we knew coming into this world automatically before our conscious minds uh gathered a bunch of data about how we think that the world works. There's a kind of foundational knowing, which isn't an intellectual knowing, it's an embodied knowing, it's a feeling. And the funny thing about that feeling and allowing that feeling to be a guiding principle in our lives is that it'll never, one thing, um, it'll never satisfy. The conscious mind will never be satisfied by anything that this part of you, which knows, uh, has to say, because it's not saying anything, it is being. And so um, that is what so one of the things that has evolved since writing the book is that if I were to do an introduction, I would, I might offer something like, uh, um, one of the things I do, one of the capacities in which I operate or perform this identity in life is and as an interfaith minister of the religion of the heart. And so with Laura Rose Gage and I, what we do is we run something called Life in the Heart Ministries. We meet on weekends. We have men's groups and women's groups, and uh, what it is, at least if from my angle, what it is about is taking the invitation, choosing to choosing the choice of choosing to choose a relationship with the world that allows for the possibility of this still small voice, this whatever this is that's uh, 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 offering its leadership, offering the thread upon which we can pull and then be led, right? Um, to just sit with that, and of course, it's the scariest possible thing to this ego, to the conscious mind, and you know, um, one of the things I'll offer that got me on this thread is that uh, I don't. One of the things that I say in our ministry is that I don't care what you call it, but I care that you care about it. Um, and one of the things that I've encountered recently is I've talked to atheists with more faith than people of the book that I've met, and I've talked to um, addicts, who are less addicted to the stories in their conscious mind, that they
Yeah.
think are guiding them, um, than someone who's, as clean and as sober as could be,
Hmm.
So again, just to say that I don't care what you call it. I care that you care about it does in a way paint a kind of dualism. This is what we're talking before we hit record about a kind of teleological non-dualism or teleontology. Maybe we can get into that and what that means and why the concept of telos and teleology is one of the things that's missing from our uh, secular existentialist scientific materialist paradigm that we've all inherited, both from the conscious mind and from culture. Um, but the funny thing about it is, even though I'm painting a kind of dualism by saying, yeah, there's like this thing. If for there to be this thing which exists, it must also imply that there's something which is not that thing. Except for the fact that the definition of the thing that we're playing with includes the thing which is also not it. So right as soon as we start to dance with this, we're right there in the kind of non-dual duality of non-dualism dueling with itself. right? Um, Gosh, I'm all over the place, Kate. What do you give me? Yeah, tell me, what do you think? Because I just want to say, like, whenever I get on a podcast, I'm always I'm always greeting the container that's offered, and so I just riff, and it's really fun to be here. I'm feeling those edges or the lack of those edges, and I also know that you are deeply intelligent, and you are into this stuff in a way that you and I could really get into the weeds and have some really fun conversations about this. So I'm going to pass the ball over back to you. What do you think?
Well, thank you. So, what intrigues me about your book, it very much kind of parallels where I am at in my life experience. And
Hmm.
it feels, I mean, I think that's kind of the premise, kind of speaking for itself, is that
Hmm.
as you step into this understanding and this awareness, you can't unsee it. Like everything just kind of reflects it back to you. And so
Yeah.
my experience was just I guess you could call it like kind of in a typical materialist worldview, like a lot of people, where I was just
Hmm.
kind of running on programs, thinking things just are what they are. And I did suspect that there was some kind of like higher intelligence out there, but it was
Mm.
out there. And maybe,
Mm.
maybe when you die, you would encounter it, but it didn't really have much of an influence on my day-to-day life. And um, and it
Mm.
was largely kind of like a cold, uncaring world, very chaotic. And so then when I learned about manifestation, and I came through it like a lot of people, kind of the more mainstream teachings like law of attraction, the secret, Abraham Hicks. And so when I came across these teachings, I was like, wow, maybe the world doesn't have to be so chaotic after all. Maybe I can control everything. It was just such an alluring premise that, oh, you just visualize something and, or just, say some statements. And then all of a sudden, you flip the switch and, living your dream life. and
Yeah.
and also kind of like a lot of people, um I found that I kind of fell into this paradigm of, from being kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, just seeing myself kind of as largely a victim of the world, to suddenly feeling like I had to control and manipulate everything. And so this was not like a fun place to be in, and it led to a lot of like disillusionment, a kind of very unhealthy relationship with my inner state, where I was constantly just being like, oh no, I thought a negative thought. Now terrible things will happen to me.
Right.
And and then when I kind of came across non-duality, all of a sudden everything started to kind of make sense on a
Hmm.
deeper level. And and
Hmm.
I just felt like this sense of peace, and
Hmm.
um and this kind of sense that there is this higher intelligence, and that it's working through you and as you, so it's not like it's
Hmm.
separate, it's not like it's out there.
Hmm.
And then at the same time, it's once you kind of surrender to it and really place your trust in it, then you no longer feel that need to try and control and force everything. And so yeah, I think it's very fitting that trust is in the title of your book, and that seems to be like one of the main premises as well, is kind of how to develop that trust.
I would offer that there's no, and I think you'd agree with this, right? That there's no such thing as a manifestation which does not have uh it's like something happens that, like, you we have this funny language for it now. Like, we say, like, you you get your manifestation, which is such a funny thing to say, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it's like I have all kinds of other ways of languaging that. I'm not even going to bother right now, but um let's just uh sort of with tongue in cheek, we're just gonna, like, you get your manifestation. And what's funny is you look back, and there's a part of you that's like breathing this big sigh of relief and like just like, hello, it was never not about trust. There's something in you which knows that there is no such thing as a manifestation which does not have like have trust at the bedrock of the like the maybe the kind of, you could even think of it as a as the
Yeah.
mechanism by which this comes about, for lack of a better means of expression, because it's not mechanical. It's far too expansive and nonlinear for to think of it as a kind of mechanism. And I think we often in New Thought we get into trouble where they turn, there's a lot of animus driven uh, uh, philosophy that puts that tries to turn this whole manifestation thing into a formula, and that's fine. Okay, great. We'll pretend it's a formula. Um, that in no way means that there isn't a life that's being asked to be lived through you by and your conscious conception of yourself be continually invited to choose a relationship with it that allows it to do exactly that.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
you know what I mean? Like, so, it's never, it's like, it's like, let's just talk paradox, like, yeah, it's never going to be that easy. And it's that the easiest, it's totally that easy. It's the
Yeah.
easiest thing in the world. It's not, and what we're doing here is what I call, I'm glad we've gotten to here, because it's, uh, this is obviously a show where I can talk about, um, these things as concepts, but also again with kind of um, tongue in cheek, knowing that uh, a concept is just a concept. There's only this one life relating to itself in the way that either feels good to it or doesn't. And what one of the things that one of the dimensions, the levels that I feel us playing in is what I like to call cosmology in practice. Um, and everyone, so like I would start by just saying like everyone has a cosmology. And if so, you go to someone and you say, well, what's your cosmology? Well, I don't know what you're talking about. Well, like, so what's the world made of, and what are you made of, and what's the relationship between those two things? What are they doing? What's the world doing? What are you doing? And how are you two related? Um, they might, you could get all kinds of things. You could get original sin. You could get Neil deGrasse Tyson, something from out of his mouth. You could get something. You could say, I don't know. We could never know that. You're asking too big of questions.
Yeah.
That's a cosmology, and it's a damn good one, actually. I would offer. Uh, that's a great one. Because what something like that's going to situate the conscious mind, the intellect, into this. I guess I might offer like kind of like its rightful place, where at the center of this, at the at the bedrock of this, there's something going on which just wants to be lived, just wants to express itself. That's that telos. Aristotle said that the telos of the acorn is to become a mighty oak. And so one of the things that we have lost in our secular existentialist scientific materialist paradigm that we've kind of inherited from culture, and which is an expression and an extension of the conscious mind's default way of relating with the world. Of course, we have a secular, existentialist, scientific, materialist paradigm. Every one of those are just every one of those are just an extension of the intellect trying to grab onto the world and thinking that it can jerk it around and like
Yeah.
know what to do here,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something in us that knows that that's not what's going on.
Exactly.
And trust, we know and we feel, is this kind of like essential ingredient. I don't like to talk in terms of criteria, there being a conditional there being a condition which must be met in order for something to be the case, right?
Yeah.
That's there's your non-dual, there's the non-dualist in me, and at the same time, the more I play with this, the more I just am increasingly met with the notion that yes, that's that's expansive, and what are you doing? Like there will never not be, so long as you conceive yourself as human, the invitation to choose that or not.
And that's what one of the premises in your book, right? Like there's really only one choice.
Yes, Kate, that's so good. That's so delicious. Uh wow. I mean, that's really good. Kate, you're good because that's something that I talk about a lot. I talk about it on podcasts, but in the book is like really kind of level, and at the same time it's dense as well. And there's a lot of things. There's things in the book, like for instance, like choosing the one choice, or say, for instance, things like what I call dropping the stick that we dropped as children, which was really the stick with which we were going to rescue the kingdom, but we dropped it in favor um, uh, of uh, of being in the world in the way that someone's adult consciousness tells us is the way to be.
Mhm.
There's little concepts like that in the book which are really only brushed over, and one of them is that. And choosing the one choice is kind of this weird paradoxical thing where there's either choosing and then there's not choosing. There's the act of of allowing my experience to communicate to my concept of self what it is that is emergent in that experience, that has the flavor of a direction, and that I can allow to move me, if I would get out of my own way, that kind of thing,
Yeah.
right? And so there's a thread, there's a secret sauce, there's something at the center of all of this.
Mhm.
And like I was just saying, like there will never not be, in so long as I conceive myself as human, the invitation to choose that thing. Anything that's not choosing that thing, I would say it's kind of a hyperbolic statement, but I don't care, right? Anything that's not choosing a relationship with God that situates you to us and God, the world and God, us and the world, whatever this is, whatever's going on, that situates this kind of like strange dichotomy, which is not a dichotomy, but feels the space between these two as something that's alive and something that I can place my trust in for no reason whatsoever. I don't need a reason to place my trust in it. It's just God is not trustworthy. God is not worthy of my trust, because that would imply that God not being worthy of my trust is even possible.
Exactly.
Right. Okay, this is so good. That good. You feel how juicy this is and how deep. So um I love it. I mean, we are like, I am like fractured into the entire like Kuiper belt, just orbiting so wide, this thing with you here, you know. And I for whoever's listening to this, I know you feel it too. I mean, that's literally all that's
Right.
going on here. There's
Mhm.
just the invitation to do less and not more.
Yes. Yeah, less is more. That's something that a philosophy that I've really adopted into my life.
Right.
And what
Right.
I appreciate about your book too is that it takes these kind of abstract concepts and it makes it very simple and it's also entertaining, which I appreciate because a lot of non-dual text and philosophical text can be pretty dry. And I also
I'm
appreciate that
glad
you
it's entertaining.
keep reiterating the same points over and over again, but in slightly different ways.
There's only one point.
Exactly. Exactly.
There's only, let's fill into that some more. Like there's this space. There's Kierkegaard. Kierkegaard was a philosopher, Western philosopher who kind of conceived of like man's essential psychology as this like existing on this uneven circle. It's like it's more like an egg-shaped circle where on one end is like the weight of God, and on the other end of this circle is me, my measly little self. And as it turns, I get to constantly be in relation with this thing. Well, we would maybe like level that circle out, and we would also say, what about like this, like the center of this circle or the space between?
Mhm.
Think open focus. This is something that Laura Rose Gage actually employs in her meditations with people. If she's guiding a meditation with someone or leading someone through a meditation, Laura Rose Gage is a partner of mine and who I work with, doing Life in the Heart Ministries and all sorts of other stuff. Uh, and she talks about the space between, feeling the space between you and this thing, this ineffable, the ultimate, absolute, capital T truth, knowable, known, unknowable, and unknown all simultaneously.
Yes. Mhm.
And feeling that what that thing is doing is what you experience as space and time. The activity of that thing is your life.
Mhm.
And I don't mean your vital force. I don't mean the energy that moves through your acupuncture channels. I don't mean how fast your chakras spin,
Mhm.
right? I mean everything in this moment now, everything that you've ever conceived yourself to be, and everything that is, that for whatever weird reason there seems to be this linear march of linear time. I mean, you're looking at pure potential
Mhm.
right in the face, or like right right in the face. And so we get to ask ourselves the question, does that relationship, does the space between me and that thing, does it feel good to me or not? And that's all I care about. Like again, I said, I'm an interfaith minister of the religion of the heart. I don't I don't care what you call it. I care that you care about it. And I don't care how you language it. I don't care what that, there's so many different ways of coming at this. The last guy I talked to who was like, no, I'm pretty much an atheist, like da 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 da. And I said, okay, tell me more about that. And he says, well, one thing that I've come to understand is that the like self-actualization, this is straight out of the mouth of the bartender the other night, and in Black Mountain, North Carolina. I just want to say, you know, uh, straight out of this guy's mouth was, self-actualization really looks more like, to me at least, uh, I think the only self-actualization is in knowing that there's no such thing as self-actualization. Like self-actualization is understanding that that's not a destination or an objective. Something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah, I forget exactly how he languaged it, but he was using the word self-actualization. And I said, you realize, like, you just said the same thing that the Oracle of Delphi said to Socrates, um, uh, which slotted Socrates as the wisest man alive.
Mhm.
All I know is that I know nothing, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. And the thing is, all that is a kind of rhetorical device. That's just a rhetorical device for getting our conscious, intellectual, rational, type A personalities over
Mhm.
here in the passenger seat. Like, it's like you've got a, like, something else is in the driver's seat. This is a self-driving car. And having that conversation with the type A personality in the passenger seat is just the way of saying, get your hand off the steering wheel. Get get that hand off the steering wheel. You don't need that hand on the steering wheel. Watch this. It's a self-driving car, dude.
Yeah. Yeah, that also seems to be one of the premises of your book and really just life in general is just taking your hand off the steering wheel. I like to say surrendering to the flow of God.
Surrendering to the flow of God. Surrendering to the flow of God. And what's funny about that is that it's not a God is not violent. God is not an asshole. So it's not like, you know, what we're surrendering to is the violence that we perpetrate upon ourselves, thinking that we are uh, operating with limited, scarce, finite resources of time, energy, money, and relationship and
Hmm.
meaning. To think that meaning is something that is like a resource which must be managed. That's
Yeah.
what existentialism and nihilism teaches us. And
Hmm.
again, secular existentialist, scientific materialist, this paradigm, right? The philosophers of our time, the academics, their solution to what they call the meaning crisis is just repackaged existentialism. You've got to understand cognitive psychology well enough to know that if you don't make it up for yourself, then you're not going to have it.
Hmm.
So do meaningful work and
Hmm.
find meaningful
Yeah.
work and create the meaning in your life. And I call bullshit.
Hmm.
Um, because meaning is not something you're gonna be digging forever.
Yeah.
You're like an archaeologist over
Uh-huh.
here digging because something told you that it was in this direction. You're just gonna dig to the center of
Yeah.
the earth and out the other side, and it's never gonna be there. And if you would turn your head 90 degrees and take your finest little bristle brush and just dust the surface of this rock because you thought it was a rock. It's not. It's the skeleton of God, and it's
Hmm.
alive.
Yeah.
Holy crap! What Indiana Jones movie is this? I don't know. Um, what do you think, Kate?
Well, it's funny when you say that. I kind of relate that to digging up limiting beliefs, right? And if you're digging, you're always just going to find more to dig up. Dig up.
Kate, my dear, that is, I'm telling you, there's something really profound about your whatever your life has created for you, this walk through the world that you seem to be inviting for yourself and your participation in it, your ability to say, hey, man, do I get that I don't get, but that some part of me gets, right?
Mhm.
Both simultaneously, what's going on here? And I can hear the voice of of the invitation to be in the world in the way that feels good to me. And that there's nothing else to do. There's
Yeah.
nothing else to do. So do your manifestation methods, do
Mhm.
your quantum jumping, this and that, like
Yeah.
participate in the world in whatever way you want to. Do what you want when you want because you want to. But do what you want when you want because you want to, trusting that you're in the right place at the right time for the right reason.
Hmm.
Um, and that's it. I mean, Kate, you're tripping me out a little bit because I feel like we have done so when I have conversations with people, I there's touching down like where we're like, oh, that's right. There's this thing that I can let live in me, which feels good. There's like this thing. Ah, ah. And then our conscious mind jumps right back to the fore and says, but Connor, what about when let's go back right into it and let's just and then, oh, that's right. There's this thing. Yeah, but Connor, what about when okay, fine. Let's just do it again and let's just touch down. And we're just gonna touch down. And we're just going to be reminded over and over that, hey, there's nothing to do here. There's nowhere to go from this place. Right here, right now. I am here. I exist.
Hmm.
Do I need to do anything else? Is there anything missing or lacking in this moment? Don't think so. I might think so,
Yeah.
but that doesn't make it true. So what is my mind trying to tell me? And what is its sort of natural inclination about the way that it wants to be in the world? And how can I be in right relation? I, whoever the I that knows, feels, is in relation with this thing, has its finger on the pulse, is in the driver's seat, the actual driver's seat. That part of you, the Father in me doeth the work. Yeah, I and the Father are
Exactly.
one. Right, and if we're asked to be of like minds with Christ, Paul says, you know, who thought it not robbery to do the works of God. Well, I mean, okay, you know, there's a this is all interpretation, and you know, but we've not only have we touched down, you're so there, Kate, and so is everyone listening to this,
Totally.
where there's this place where the silence just is so loud. It's so loud. The silence is so loud. And that's what I call touching the bottom.
Hmm.
I love it. We started this interview. I'm like in 50 different places, and then it all triangulates into this point. And something is said where it's like, and all illusion is just shed in an instant, and truth walks into the room. Capital T, truth walks into the room, and truth speaks for itself in a way that the conscious mind, it's like, God, it's like authenticity, man.
Hmm.
It's like when you're like, to be in the world in a way that's authentic, truly, whatever that means, but you know what I mean. To one of the natural conclusions of that is, geez, my role in the world, like who it was that I thought that who it is that I thought that my identity, God, looks nothing like what I thought my entire life.
Yeah.
I had dinner with someone the other night, and what she said was, it feels so different now being me.
Yeah.
Being me feels so different than it used to feel.
Hmm.
And that's because the person who she understands herself to be is more participatory in something even bigger than the grand metaphysical stories that we're capable of telling ourselves about new 5D, new earth ascension, this kind of, Christian rapture, and all this stuff. Like it's bigger even than that.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and it's funny because I used to be really into those teachings that talked about like soul contracts and all of
Yeah,
that. And I like how you describe it in your book because it's very down to earth. And it's just like the two souls, right, that are in heaven and kind of like discussing, okay, well, what's it going to be like when we come to earth? And all of a sudden we're in these separate bodies and we're having, these human experiences and all these limitations. And and the conclusion really is that we're not really even coming here into the human experience to learn any sort of lesson, because that's what I believed for a long time, that it was all about learning lessons. That no, it's just for the experience of it. And there's something, I don't know, there's just something very liberating about that. Because that
yeah,
was part of my progression, I guess, from believing that it was all just random and meaningless and kind of hopeless
right,
to feeling like, oh, all of a sudden
right,
there's a purpose and lessons and meanings and soul contracts
right.
and really getting into that whole paradigm and then realizing that no, it's there's not even a lesson, it's just about the whole experience.
For there to be a lesson, first of all, for there to be a lesson implies that you lack.
Yeah,
It implies that you are ignorant.
exactly.
And the conscious mind, the intellect, grasps onto the things which it thinks it perceives, and it assumes that they're solid,
Hmm.
and it assumes that they are real, and it assumes that they are three-dimensional objects in this sort of linear space-time, um, the laminar flow of space and time. And yeah, I mean, sure, but yeah, no. I mean, yeah, but no. And I don't know if you remember. I love that you're bringing that up. The sort of reframe that is talked about in the book is that sure, you want to talk about soul contracts, great, soul contracts. The thing is that soul contract is just a it's just informed consent
Mhm.
and a liability waiver.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just informed consent. Hey, you're going on a roller coaster ride.
Uh-huh.
It's scary, but remember, it's fun. It's a
Mhm.
roller coaster ride. Why does anyone get on a roller coaster ride in the first place other than to enjoy it?
Mhm.
Uh, in heaven, there's no peer pressure to your friends can't peer pressure you into getting on a roller coaster ride. It's just choice. It's choice. It's the choice
Yeah.
to exist in this in this form, to be made in this image, in this way.
Mhm.
Well, that's a little to be made. Yeah, yeah, okay, this it's not the image, it's being made. To be made in this way. There's only one image in which anything can be made,
Yeah. Mhm.
right? And so it's informed consent. It's like, dude, it's a roller coaster, just want you to know. And it's liability. If you take this roller coaster and you literally get your physical head knocked off, uh and you wake up back here, like, what was that? Oh, that's right. It was oh God, I
Yeah.
forgot. I was taking it so seriously, and oh crap, that was a crazy I want to do it again.
Yeah.
So yes, and you see now, I love it. You're talking about your story, and it's beautiful, and you're saying, look at the reframe that you've done, where it's like people we've inherited this kind of attitude towards, say, reincarnation and karma and all these kinds of things, as if God is an asshole,
Yeah.
and as if there's something about existence which inherently sucks,
Yeah.
and that there's pain and suffering writ at the bottom of this, and you have to kind of slog through that if you're gonna get to the meat.
Mhm.
And dude, uh, it doesn't have to be that way. That is a
Exactly.
that's a story.
Mhm.
That's a story. Yeah.
Yeah, so speaking of like pain and suffering, and so this is, I think the mind just always tries to come up with all these, what's the word, like counter examples, but what about this? What about that? And
Yeah.
so you hear all the time, it's really kind of a cliche at this point, like, oh, if there was this benevolent creator, whatever, what about disease and what about war and poverty and all of that?
Right.
And my take on it is that all of these things just exist because we're just giving them these labels essentially. And sure, it's a real experience, but yeah, I'm,
Right.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so that's called the problem of evil, and I talk a little bit about that in the book, and I basically say in the book and in my philosophy whenever I talk about this, uh, like, not my problem.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
My my, which is really, really, really problematic, because people then say, "Wait, do you not care about suffering?" And I'm like, "Well, I mean, you're talking about me. You're talking about this world that we're co-creating, and you're talking about, like, existence. So in my fullness, how what do you mean that care implies, just as God being trustworthy implies that it's possible for God not to be trustworthy.
Hmm.
Asking me if I care implies that my soul is capable of not caring about this, about connection
Yeah. Hmm.
and harmony and love. It's silly, and most of what people are doing when they're invoking the problem of evil as a kind of, like, reason to kind of like position God in this kind of thing. Maybe these are some paradoxical problems with God's nature. Uh, it's problematic, but I have a kind of a little bit of a hands-off approach, and that is that what I want most, first and foremost, for everyone in the world is to do what they want when they want, because they want to, trusting that they're in the right place at the right time for the right reason.
Absolutely.
And and I'm going to say this. It's a little, again, we're kind of circling in, because the problem of evil is tough. The
Hmm.
problem of evil is just tough. Is that a belief? Is that a story? Yes. But I know that it's one of the dimensions of talking about the fullness of things from a
Yeah.
non-dual perspective that is really sticky for people. And
Hmm.
so I'll say this. Let's put it in a bumper sticker. Here's our bumper sticker. You ready? The bumper sticker is uh you want to clean up the oceans? Be yourself.
Yeah, totally.
You want to end um human trafficking? Be yourself.
Yeah.
And fill in the you want to make the world a better place? Uh uh be yourself.
Yeah.
And that is, again, what we do when we talk about these things is you and I can feel the space that it creates for the conscious mind to then jump and grab onto the steering wheel and try and crawl its way into the driver's seat in the cockpit and say, "Ba, ba, 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 ba."
Yeah.
There's
Exactly.
finite resources that I've got to play with in order,
Yeah.
and if I screw it up,
Hmm.
oh no. um And what you and I are talking about, we've been circling on around here and also touching down on completely what the conversation at hand is what I call like the only conversation. I call it the one conversation. It's the only conversation that actually matters, because it's a conversation that reminds us uh, who and what it is we actually are, where we came from, and where we're going when this is all over. Is the one that also teleologically orients us to, has the possibility of inviting us to orient ourselves back to the world. What'd you call it? Surrendering to the flow of God,
Hmm.
tilting our sails in the direction which all of a sudden we feel this movement, this natural kind of life which emerges and says, "What about this? What about
Yeah,
this?
exactly.
You, hey. What about this?" And it wants to just,
Hmm.
yeah. Well, what the hell is that doing to clean up the oceans, Connor? The invitation is to say, just just try it and watch. Trust me. Trust
Yeah.
yourself. Trust, trust, trust everything and nothing for no reason. Trust and wait and watch what happens when this fractal holographic singular, projection of a singularity comes alive as itself in your awareness, and the synchronicities and all this. That's cleaning up the oceans, I promise, because what you're doing, God is connection.
Yeah.
God is all connection, connecting with itself connectively,
Hmm.
because there's only one thing, there's only one image in which anything can be made. So for me to allow my life to be in that current,
Hmm.
it can't not be in that current. The thing is, I sound very zen maybe here, but it's like I can go kicking and screaming, or I can go joyfully,
Yeah, exactly.
like Tigger floating down the river on his back,
Hmm.
right? So that's cleaning up the oceans, man. And I do mean, and what's funny is I mean literally. I
Yeah,
really do
I
mean
agree.
literally.
Hmm.
Yeah, Kate, that's profound, my dear.
Yeah, I see it as really there's only like it's like I get this visual of the two roads, and there's really only two choices. You can go down the road of fragmentation and separation and but what about and it splinters off into like infinite directions because once you go down that route you're always it's just like playing whack-a-mole. There's always going to be like a new
Yes.
problem to solve. And or you could go the other route and just recognizing resting in that oneness and seeing the perfection behind everything, even if the appearances don't look perfect, recognizing that there's something bigger that's going on. And yeah, and just trusting that just being yeah, just being yourself and doing what you feel called to do, that that's going to be, bettering the lives of others in some way. I think everybody has like their own unique path. And even things
Hmm.
that we might consider frivolous, like entertainment and the arts, entertainers, they bring light to millions of people and they bring joy to millions of people. And so I think everybody has their
Hmm.
own thing to be that they're being called to do. Whereas once you go to the other route, the but what about route, I mean that isn't really helping anybody. And also
Right.
I think when we get to the question of evil, I think people that again a lot of people approach it from that kind of dualistic kind of black and white approach where it's like either there's this mean, unfair God that's causing all of this suffering to people. Like you said, it's just God being an asshole, or there's some people that are kind of on the other end of the extreme, saying, oh, well, if somebody is suffering or if they're struck by a natural disaster or whatever, that they
Hmm.
created that somehow. And so it's looking at it through this dichotomy of blame, essentially, and that either God is to blame or you are to blame. And either way, that's still kind of seeing it through that dualistic perspective rather than that integration of being one with the creator. um, so yeah, I think I think when you're going through out of through
Yeah.
either way, like either way, it's not a good way of of looking at it.
It's certainly one that uh privileges judgment and
Exactly.
privileges suffering. And
Yeah.
you know what I'm appreciating, Kate, is that you have such a good um you've thought about this enough to be to articulate um yeah, these different iterations of your own consciousness, your own way of relating to it, such that it's like, well, wait, so and again, invite the listeners, like, do you believe God's an asshole? We would say, first of all, okay, fine, no judgment, obviously. And does that feel good? Does it feel good to believe God's an asshole? Is it possible to believe something else? What if God's not an asshole? Ah, well, yeah, but what about suffering? What about the problem of evil? Da, 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 da. Um, we're talking about we're talking about God here, which means a pretty, if you want to situate it in space and time, we're talking about a pretty darn well high dimensional object. Uh, 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 you know, whatever 12, 12D, higher intelligence, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I don't care about that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, that's fine. It can be a helpful heuristic to talk about dimensionality, like fourth dimensional thinking and stuff like that is great. And I just call it in the book, I call it the fullness of things, like the fullness of things. Um, and when we sit with that and we're not using our mind as an excuse to not listening to the gripes that we have with existence or our perception of existence as an excuse to judge it and to say, oh yeah, but it does, da, 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 da. Over here I look and I see suffering and it's what non-judgmentality is also kind of one of the natural conclusions of one of the natural maybe outpourings of a way of being in the world that actually feels good to you. What's funny is like, again, it invokes our assumptions about human nature,
Mhm.
which is one of my favorite things to harp on about, which I won't probably go too much into. We've been going for a while here, but to say that the invitation is for us to do what we want when we want because we want to, trusting that we're in the right place at the right time for the right reason. Well, that first part, doing what I want to when I want to because I want to, is scary if I
Yeah.
believe that not only is God an asshole, what about people? Like
Hmm.
God, I've read Lord of the Flies. Come on, dude. That's a cosmology.
Yeah,
Lord of the Flies.
totally.
That's a cosmology. Again, cosmology. Who am I? What is the world? What is God? What are these things made of? How do they relate? You know, um, and you said natural disasters. I'm 5 minutes in that direction is Swannanoa, North Carolina.
Hmm.
I I used to live down there. I used to live on Beatree, off of Beatree Creek, and the cabin that I was beautiful, beautifully kind of made up, very very pretty. The landlords are wonderful people, and they kind of dolled it up. I had this double wide trailer that was so nice. um, um, on Beatree Road, is gone.
Oh, wow.
And for those who don't may not know what I'm talking about the September, I believe it was September 27th, floods
Hmm.
that hit the Western North Carolina uh, area, the Western North Carolina, Eastern Tennessee area, and caused tremendous amount of damage. I think 78,000 homes gone or damaged, significantly damaged. So um, you mentioned natural disasters. It's funny. I'm a few minutes away from where I used to live, and um, I was talking to a friend last night, and she said she had this kind of energy about it. I wouldn't say that it's the story that I metaphysically kind of um participate in, but the important part is that there's a reframe in there
Hmm.
where she says look at the earth or whatever, look at just all this energy just being cleared up and made anew and all this kind of stuff. And I said that's a reframe. That's a beautiful reframe. Now there's no one. Now your judgment doesn't get to come in there and point fingers because you've reframed this into something inherently purposeful and
Yeah.
meaningful.
Hmm.
um the thing that's the thing that screams the loudest to me about all this is the way that in the face of this kind of disaster, um people, the human spirit, whatever this is, consciousness, this coming together, people, my God, you're not, black, white, red, blue. People
Hmm.
put aside these differences that we think that we've got for connection and to thrive in the face of adversity.
Hmm.
Because look, that's God. God is connection. God is the ability for this whole thing to be made self-aware as what it actually is in the awareness of the thing that thinks it's experiencing it.
Hmm. Absolutely.
And it's beautiful. So when people talk about how messed up everything is, I'm like, have you seen the way people have, for instance, come together, like even in a place like this,
Yeah.
absolutely devastated. Um, and what do people do? They unite.
Hmm.
They they love. they find deep, deep community. And that is, on the one hand, it's a it's a story about human nature and human interconnectedness and the human heart and the human spirit. And on the other hand, it's a statement about it's a story about the world and life and consciousness
Yeah.
and what's actually going on here. There's no other way for that to be, I don't think.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, I think that's pretty powerful
yeah.
hearing that, going, you went through an experience that some people would label as being like a very devastating experience. And
I
because
wasn't here, by
sometimes,
the way, at that time. I wasn't here at the time. I was living
okay,
elsewhere, but I used to live down there. Yeah, yeah,
but you lost your home, correct?
yeah. Where I used to live was is gone. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, I mean, look, I mean, it's funny, and I don't play this at all, but I'm just, you've read the book, so one of the things that I don't necessarily say in the book is I don't talk about it. I just say that my mother's passing was uh, um, sudden.
Hmm.
I mean, she went from healthy to dead in a week.
Wow.
Okay, so um, yeah, yeah. Anyway, go ahead. But I mean, but what I say, she didn't go anywhere. So
Hmm.
there's the invitation to reframe. Um, God, there's so much more to talk about, Kate. It's like the brilliance and beauty and power of spiritual bypassing. It's one of my favorite conversations to have because spiritual bypassing gets this rap, and I like to repurpose it. Spiritual bypassing is the way. But what we mean by that is what I mean is, as Laura Rose Gage would put it, is like uh, choosing a relationship that feels good to you in regards to this internal spiritual resource that you have,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So, okay, yeah, this was all over the place. Kate, what do you think? Any how much longer do these go? Are you what's the plan, Stan?
No real plan, just purely exploratory. I just wanted to
Yeah,
dive in, and obviously this could probably go on forever. Like I said,
I think it could.
I was highlighting almost every line in the book. But yeah, I just wanted to just briefly touch upon what we just talked about, that the last, I guess, segment of our conversation, because I think
Yeah.
a lot of people, they see these spiritual principles as, oh, that's kind of a nice idea, but but it's just kind of an idea. And then once life becomes really hard, then it all kind of goes out the window. And I think what you just described is a very powerful example of how these principles, they aren't just abstract concepts, and they can actually really help us in the face of something that might be considered a really difficult circumstance or a very tragic circumstance.
Uh, you know, your fragile little old Christian grandmother wakes up one morning with shingles all over her. Oh God! Wakes up, she's like, oh, and she calls, got the shingles, and someone rushes to her house like, oh my God, we got to get you. Ah, ah. And then grandma says, God's got this. I'm not worried. God's got this. It's just shingles. He made this body, made this life. Hell, if it kills me, whatever, and there's, and I think we've said it. In other words, and this grandma, she wakes up the next morning and she's fine. God's got this,
Yeah.
and and I'm hearing mine in your ability to relate on this level. I know that we have said it, and I will always say it, that whoever's listening to this knows exactly what we're talking about, whether they consciously accept that they do or not. And Um, I just want to point out again that every every time you point at this thing, the conscious mind goes, "Yeah, I don't know," but you're like, "No, I'm pointing at like the ineffable, absolute, ultimate truth, creator, creation, God, spirit, source, the universe, life, love." I'm pointing at that and like all of the power there and everything that's available to us and how we might relate with that in a way that not just feels good. I mean, I know I say feels good, but yeah, feels good is a good there's a good litmus test for if it's if you're playing with it, you know, and with your conscious mind. And on the other hand, it doesn't just feel good. It orchestrates your life, the experience of consciousness unfolding in front of your eyes. I mean, we call that synchronicity, we call that manifestation, we call that providence, we call that kismet. Da, 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 da. So yes, it is the most terrifying thing to tell your conscious mind, hey, you've never been in control one moment of your life.
Yeah.
And to then say, hey, it's really is okay if you take your hands off the wheel.
Hmm.
Uh you want me, I mean, again, look, you want manifestation, you want abundance, you want synchronicity, you want these things. It's you can't go squeezing blood from a stone
Hmm.
and the blood uh 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 um you can't serve two masters.
Hmm.
Choose this day whom you will serve, and it is what it is it's a relationship with the world that lets God do what God has always intended to do through this life of yours.
Yeah, that I have a new understanding now. This is how I interpret what Neville refers to. And I guess it probably wasn't Neville that made it up. I'm sure it probably came from the Bible, right? The pearl of great price.
Yes.
And
Hmm.
yeah, so buying the pearl of great price, that's how I interpret it now, is I think you finally, your mind just tries to kind of dice everything up and micromanage everything and put all these labels and come up with endless just rules and laws so that it feels like it's in control. But when you finally exhausted all of that and realize none of that really works and it's not really making you any happier, then you finally come back to this realization that, yeah, there's just this one consciousness, this one source. And if I align with that rather than just pretending I can do it all these convoluted ways, then I'm going to be a lot better off.
It's
I
it's yeah. Go
because
ahead.
I remember I came across these truths earlier, and I would get it. I would feel the resonance in it, but then there would always then the logical mind would kick in, and it would be like it would always be saying, "Oh, how is this going to make you money? You know, how is this going to pay the bills?"
Ah, ah, God is my supply.
Exactly.
And I just want to say too, like again, like because people's conscious minds have a hard time hearing the practicality of this.
Mhm.
And it's calling you now. It's inviting you. Actually, sometimes I often don't use the word calling, or if I do it kind of in this colloquial, tongue-in-cheek kind of a way, but it's inviting you now. And so, again, to the extent to which we can drop into the present moment, look around ourselves and see that there's just this world, which is both, it's kind of like this neutral thing, and at the same time, kind of pregnant with this this life and this and sort of inherent meaning to it. And that would be real nice to like maybe feel better about that, feel good about that. Oh God, it's so scary to take my hands off the wheel. And it's like what I'm talking about here is one moment to the next,
Mhm.
allowing your body to be moved in the direction in which it finds itself moving automatically when there's this presence with space and time and this sort of non-judgmentality. And um again, it's funny, we haven't said this. We kind of have maybe, but I just want to say too that there is no how. There
Mhm.
is no there is no methodology. This is one of the reasons why the conscious mind has a hard time not hearing something that it doesn't know how to make practical sense of,
Yeah,
is because there's no way to make practical sense of the way in which God is orchestrating this whole thing. It's not
exactly.
possible to make sense of it, but it is possible to do less and not more. It is
Mhm.
possible to sit in the uncomfortable silence of that chattering type A personality in the passenger seat. Uh, we'll just call it the backseat driver, or
Mhm.
whatever. Like it is possible to sit with that and have the courage. Again, uh this is something that Laura Rose Gage would say because it's an important part of her kind of cosmology is courage. Um, that choosing the one choice is essentially, it takes courage. It's the choice to be courageous enough to trust something which to the conscious mind is totally untrustworthy. This whole conversation, Kate, has just been a conversation about faith,
Yes,
and
totally.
it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I got from your book, and this is really where everything in my life has been leading, is recognizing, okay, I'm this infinite being, I'm having this human experience, and there's nothing wrong with the human experience either. Like I used to think that I had to overcome the sense
Mm-mm.
of being, the sense of separation, or the sense of like being like in a human body and linear
Yeah.
time and gravity and all of that. And I was like, no, this is just part of the movie. And if the movie,
Right.
like you say, like if if we could suddenly, I don't know, fly through the air, it wouldn't, the movie wouldn't really be fun anymore. And so it's all just part of the movie, but knowing that there's something beyond all of this, I think that's kind of where the sweet spot is.
Yeah, it's like God is gravity, man.
Yeah.
Like this whole thing, just orchestrating it, like pulling it closer to itself,
Hmm.
forming these crystalline matrices of of inner of self interaction and interrelation. And um yeah, I agree. And that's called, we could call that tantra maybe,
Hmm.
or something of that nature, like the reconciliation of this Platonist ideal that spirit and matter are separate. I had a conversation this morning with someone where it was like, I think this might be a more of a spiritual thing than a physical thing. And of course, it's like I don't I don't admit of there being a difference between what my mind wants to call spiritual and what my mind wants to call physical or material. So there's no difference.
Hmm.
And um, I mean, what that invites us to do is then participate in a world which is more enchanted
Hmm.
and more spiritually alive than it would be if we were kind of thinking the, you know, knock on wood, like brick and mortar Newtonian billiard ball perception of, atomic reality and stuff is has something else to say than what my heart does.
Hmm.
Um, no, no, it's actually, I mean, it's actually all you, which is
Yeah,
really, again,
exactly.
it's like if you want to clean up the oceans, be yourself.
Hmm.
What do you mean it's all me, man? Do you just not care about other people, Connor? Um, and here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say, I said this was a funny thing I said a couple days ago on my interview with on a manager on a mission was I said I I'll say it this way. Do you just not care about people, Connor? And I would answer like not in the way that you are asking,
Hmm.
right? Not in the way that you mean care, because the care that you're talking about is a kind of behavioral, conditional, it's a kind of performance.
Totally.
And that's not what no, I mean I am where my life leads me. It's like miracles are just every single day over and over and over. It's so commonplace to perceive the world coming together with itself in a way that's meaningful to my senses and to my concepts and my consciousness, saying, oh wow, holy moly, the synchronicity of like these things all being merged in like some thing that's emerged, like, and then it just stacks on levels upon levels. Like you can't tell me uh anything other than you want to clean up the oceans, be yourself.
Absolutely.
um yeah, that's the presidential campaign that we're going to run on. We're going to run on we're going to run on hey, do it yourself. You know what I mean? And it's funny, it's a good example. Look, here in Swananoa and stuff, FEMA didn't come. FEMA didn't help these people. I'm not, and this is nothing against FEMA with people who work for FEMA.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is like taxpayer money was was not significantly allocated to um, remediating what's going on here in a way that people would look at. It's like you can talk to the people here with boots on the ground. It's like, no, yeah, we didn't receive aid.
Yeah.
All the aid here was mutual aid. It was
Hmm.
literally uh, Joe Schmo who had enough gas. He had signal on his phone,
Hmm.
and he puts up a go. He puts his Venmo onto Facebook and
Hmm.
says, "Who wants to give me money? I've got a 16-foot trailer, and I know the route to get from here to the nearest something something. And if y'all will give me cash, I will bring back as much bottled water and toilet paper and tampons, as I can."
Yeah.
Uh, and these were this is what was going on. I mean,
Hmm.
people were, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Again, it's and there's such a celebration here of the way that, you go down the highway and you see, Swananoa strong, WNC strong, Asheville strong,
Hmm.
Appalachia strong. And it's not even strong. What it is I would reframe it and I would say, no, this is life. This is
Hmm.
every
Totally.
one of these people have the desire to come together in that way. There's no one here who doesn't have it in their heart to see one another thrive.
Yeah. Totally.
That's just life.
Hmm.
That's no big deal. Like, I mean,
Hmm.
yeah, we celebrate that, but like, hello. Uh, there's a when you the teleological perspective on non-dualism that I take is that there's something going on here which moves in this lifeward direction. And people say, oh yeah, what about the cold heat death in the entropic universe of, something Neil deGrasse Tyson told me on a YouTube video or something. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, sure, mathematics and physics, sure, but what does your heart say in this moment? And I just the world is quite magical and quite alive and quite beautiful and quite holy, quite sacred, quite uh, quite quite open and free, and um, the world is your oyster. And to know that the way to clean up the oceans is by being yourself is an entirely different cosmology than one that uh, a cosmology that asks me of my behavior or my performance to be geared towards managing the scarce resources that I think I have to have in order to be nice and to be good and all those kinds of things. Where goodness is just what's going on. Goodness is by nature.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah,
Totally.
yeah. I think that's a. I mean, I feel complete, Kate. What do you
Totally. I
think?
think
Yeah.
I think that's a great note to end on. And yes, I will put a link to your book in the description. I think everybody, I would definitely recommend reading it because I think it's just a great, I don't know, I won't use the word distillation because distillation kind of implies like watering down, but I think it's a great, I guess, organization of all of the ideas that we talked about. Um, yeah, and just kind of this whole idea of trusting in this divine power.
Yeah, distillation to me implies a purification
Hmm.
and a concentration and a purification and the removal of I would agree that the book is a distillation of it because
Okay.
we've been all over the place.
Yes.
So
Yes.
the book is a sort of a more congruent kind of in some ways, for lack of a better word, interestingly, kind of a somewhat more of a linear presentation of
Mhm.
these ideas,
Totally.
which is really ironic, isn't it?
Yes. Yes.
Um, Kate, this has been absolutely phenomenal. Thank you. I really feel like I'm just talking to a buddy of mine, you know.
Same.
Yeah. And to your listeners, thank you so much for joining us for this. I know that you know what we're talking about. It's not possible for you not to know exactly what we're talking about. And you know that that's true too, you know. Um, and and yeah, I'm excited to give this a listen when it comes out and hear what was going through my mind. and uh and yeah, I appreciate you, and I'd love to do this again sometime if you ever have repeat guests and all that kind of stuff.
Totally.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Thank
good deal. Thank you so much, my dear,
you.
and we'll be in touch.
Sounds good.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.